Hello everyone and welcome back to Ruby Lessons in Codecademy. So today we're going to be starting a new section on hashes and symbols. Today's lesson specifically is going to be more about hashes. We're first of all going to start by recapping and then getting to some new things. So let's get started. The story so far about hashes, so recall, if you don't remember, then make sure to go and watch either my older YouTube videos, or go on that link, or watch someone else's videos, or whatever, to find out more about what hashes are. But basically they're like dictionaries in Python, and normally things like hashes are called dictionaries, even in other programming languages. So recall that Ruby hashes are just a collection of key-value pairs, where you get to define the key and the value, where a unique key is associated with some value. So for example, bacon is associated with tasty, eggs, tasty, oatmeal, healthy, OJ, juicy. I'm pretty sure that's just a juice in America or something. I'm not too sure. Don't quote me on that. Remember that keys must be unique, but values can repeat. So the key is like the index in the list in a way. If you want to unlock the value, the key, you have to give it the key. So that means that the key has to be unique, because one house can only be accessed by one key, but there can be multiple items in that house. Another good comparison, I think. That's why we can have more than one key share the value tasty, like we have bacon and eggs. So we can create hashes several ways, but two of the most popular are hash literal notation and hash constructor notation. So literal notation is also shown here, and then constructor notation is shown here. So you have new hash equals hash new. So this is just the name. It can be just called hash 1, 2, 3, 4 if you really want to, but this is the main thing, equals hash dot new, and with a capital H. Okay, so what we need to do is read the instructions and then do what they ask us. Create a hash called myHash. Okay, it's quite easy. Using whichever method you prefer. We happen to like the hash literal notation. I think that I'm just going to do that for now, because we haven't been given any values, so it doesn't really matter. Hash.new. There we go. Good, we have just created our new hash called myHash. Moving on. Iterating over hashes. So we also covered this in different ways. We can also iterate over hashes using the .each method. So for example, we could do myHash.each. So we're going through each element of myHash. We're giving it the key, and we're taking the key and value pairs, and puts key, comma, myHash of key, which is actually going to be the value. So to print out a list of keys and values from myHash, each on its own line, you have to do something like this. Iterate over the maths hash. Okay, so maths.each do, and then pipes, key value again. You can reuse those, but oops, that's supposed to be a Z. There we go. So you can reuse these, but this has to be the name of your hash. The .each is always the same because it's a method. So iterate over the maths hash and print out each value to the console using puts. Don't print out the keys. Okay, fair enough. Also, I'm not going to use do, as I've said a few times before. I prefer this notation. We will do puts, and there are two ways of doing this. So we can do puts value. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is puts maths key, and that's also going to give us the same result. There we go. As you can see, it's the exact same result, but gotten in different ways. If we were doing this, I also believe that we can just remove the value because we're not using it. Or, okay. Okay, so you can't. Never mind. Because the hash contains two things, and you have to give both of them a value or a variable. Otherwise, it's confused which one you want. So therefore, you can either do this or this. I'm pretty sure that efficiency doesn't change much between which method you use in this case. So moving on. Nil, a formal introduction. So this is something new that we haven't covered yet. So what happens if you try to access a key that doesn't exist though? would you get an error? In many languages, you'll get an error of some kind. Not so in Ruby. You'll instead get the special value nil. So along with false, nil is one of the 2 non-true values in Ruby. Every other object is regarded as truthy, meaning that if you were to type if2 or if bacon, the code that in that if statement would be run. So if bacon would execute as true, if you had if true, if2, again if true. If you had if 0, I believe that might be a false, because you have zeros and ones, of course. I will test that out right now because I don't want to have done anything wrong, but hello? Oops, not that. And that's supposed to be, there's supposed to be an end here. That's one. Okay, so no, 0 is also regarded as true. So only false and nil are regarded as false, or as a non-true value. So it's important to realize that false and nil are not the same thing though. False means not true, while nil is Ruby's way of saying nothing at all, so nothing exists. They're not the same, I don't know how to explain them. I know that Google Images, or Google Maps I believe, sometimes if you don't put a location of your image, it puts it at coordinate 0, 0. But that's not true, because that image doesn't have anything, so that should be nil instead of like a false value, which would give it like 0, 0. I remember reading about that somewhere. So nil just means nothing, whereas false means false or not true. So go ahead and try to access the key in creatures that doesn't exist. So tigers? Why is that a thing? Never mind. Put creatures and I will access hello, which does not exist. And as you can see, what we get printed out is nil. Oh, okay. It doesn't want us to print anything out. Okay. Well, we get returned nil. We don't get an error like we would in some other languages. I believe that Python is one of those languages that would give an error. So moving on. Setting your own default. You don't have to settle for nil as a default value, however. If you create your hash using the hash.new syntax, you can specify a default like so. So every time you try to access a key that doesn't exist in this hash, instead of giving you nil, it's going to give you the string tradiblix. Now if you try to access the okay, I already said that. You can always read more hashy goodness in the official Ruby documentation. You have the link in the bottom left corner if you need it. Instructions. In the meantime, create a hash called no hash and give it any default value other than nil. Equals hash.new, and in these brackets I'm actually going to put false, just to show that it's going to give a different result. So anything I access in this hash now is going to be non-existent because it's an empty hash. So if we do something, oops, oh, that would be a variable, never mind. And as you can see, it prints out false, or puts out whatever you want to call it. It shouldn't really do that, but it does it anyway. If I do true, it's going to give us true. If we put anything in here, it's going to give us that. And in this case, because I made it a string, it gives it to us as a string. So good. That is what we want, because sometimes if there isn't a value, you don't just want to get nil. If you want to test for that value, then it doesn't really matter, but sometimes you want to get another default value, which is quite useful. A key for a different color. We can certainly use strings as Ruby hash keys. As we've seen, there's always more than one way to do something in Ruby. We've seen that many times. However, the Rubyists' approach would be to use symbols. So instructions, check out the code in the editor. Those funny looking variables that start with colons are symbols, okay? Click save and submit code to see what happens, then head to the next section for a symbol rundown. So in the next video we will be talking more about symbols, but let's just see. We have foxes, gives 2. Okay, so we will be looking at what this does in the next lesson. But for now, I guess I'm going to have to leave it on a cliffhanger. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share, subscribe, it encourages me to make more videos, and yeah. If you have any questions, as I've said many times before, do feel free to ask in the comments down below, I will answer them as soon as possible. Until next time though, thank you so much for watching and goodbye.